Air Canada just made history by hosting a flight with an all-queer crew this Pride Month. But when we posted about it, wow, the comments exploded. Some cheered. Others called it a marketing stunt or said hire for skill, not identity. We're here in Vancouver, one of Canada's queerest cities, to talk to everyday people about pride, inclusion, and what fairness really looks like. What has been your favorite part of Pride Month, or what are you still looking forward to?
Seeing the city come together and getting the whole street of Davie dressed up in all the colors, getting everyone kind of come together, get down the strip and kind of have some fun.
Just how many pride parades are still happening in the US, seeing how resilient the community's been.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different parties around Granville and around Commercial Drive, which is going to be really fun.
Celebrating Pride the proper way, which is maybe a little bit of protest, a little bit of riot.
Canada is often seen as a global leader when it comes to queer rights, marriage equality, anti-discrimination protections, and gender identity recognition. But scroll through social media and you'll find plenty of pushback. Are inclusion efforts seen as overdue progress or just performative? Do you think this example of like an all-queer flight by Air Canada, do you think that's an example of corporate pride, or do you think that it's an important public campaign for pride?
I would say it's more of a corporate. There's certain aspects that you could look at it from. I could see both point of views of where people would stand on the matter. You know, if a company like Air Canada wants to do that and wants to bring people together and show a sign of unity, I think that's awesome.
I think really it boils down to like, what is Air Canada doing when it's not Pride? Especially this year with what's happening in the US, we've seen a lot of like corporate organizations like pull out from Pride. And, you know, there's pros and cons to that. Like the con is that obviously there's less visibility, there's less people being recognized. And also there's often like funds linked to those sponsorships. But I think inevitably it does show us like who actually cares about the community. And I think that it's kind of like a good kind of cleaning of the slate of organizations that really only do it for the sake of profit and not really to show actual support.
Why does queer inclusion still divide Canadians? And what's the real experience of queer folks in this country?
I think in general, people get a little bit too into their own world of wanting to see kind of things of how they view their own values on other companies.
One thing that we need to get straight is that like what happens online is like an extreme version of what really happens in reality. Like it's always easy to focus on the negative and see that one or a couple like really bad comments without acknowledging that when I step out onto the street, I don't necessarily hear that at all, right?
I think there's still like close-minded people that, for example, you're too feminine, I don't want to hang out with you, or you're too masculine, I don't want to hang with you. I think we should be more open. I support the idea of promoting like a flight. Like it doesn't really affect me.
Why are these conversations still so uncomfortable? Let's find out what's holding people back from talking openly about queer inclusion.
It could be politics. I think like a lot of people are driven by what happens in the States, right? And we live in a bipartisan culture. I feel like for some people, they just feel like a marriage equality was passed, I believe in 2005 in Canada. And so they feel like, you know, this is like a non-issue. But of course, some of us like recognize that gay people or gay men are very visible in the media right now. But we really need to like focus on those subsets of the communities that don't get as much representation. I'm like trans women of color.
Yeah.
I think people are still scared of something different, you know? So there has been some kind of like backwards transition towards like queerness.
I think there's still a lot of people that come from traditional values and maybe from an onset early age that's not instilled in them, whether it's in schools, whether it's in communities, whether it's in churches. And I think it takes some time to get those kind of doctrines maybe out of their head, or maybe just more of an overall view of trying to focus more on the human beings themselves rather than their political or their, you know, religious views or where they stand in terms of their sexual orientation.
Queer Canadians have made enormous gains in visibility. But according to Statistics Canada, police reported hate crimes targeting sexual orientation rose by 64% between 2019 and 2021. And that's just what was reported. History shapes identity, and for queer youth, knowing they've always existed matters. Do you think it's important for young people to have access to queer history?
As a historian, I very much would have to say yes. You know, it's great that queerness is so accepted nowadays, but a lot of younger queer people aren't knowing where they come from, and they don't see all the things that led up to like where they can be now. It's important to keep it known as a community because it's how we stay strong within ourselves.
Absolutely. If you don't have that queer history, no one knows really what people have been fighting for this entire time. I feel like it's good that they know at least a little bit, and then later in life they're able to kind of explore more into it in depth than like voicing it onto them.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's a difficult thing to teach in schools because when you're young, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, it's difficult to involve sexual orientation into what people want to believe. And I don't know if that necessarily has a place in schools.
Right.
I think if you want to teach it outside of that, sure.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit difficult then for parents to want to put kids into schooling that teaches that kind of things. Not to say that it's wrong, but it's just you want to have a very uniform education for your child, at least what I would have. And I would have second thoughts if that was being taught into the school because of different backgrounds that I don't maybe want my kid to be exposed to.
What about it like being a part of school curriculums? Do you think that that is something that should be available in schools?
I think it should be put as an extracurricular, mainly because I think it's very important, but not everyone wants to know about it. It's kind of like in schools growing up where we learned strictly about Canadian history.
Right.
And then we had choices later to, learn about the US history and the European history and stuff like that. So I think it's a good thing to have a choice in of like whether you want to have it. Unfortunately, we're still in that age where parents are still going to be uncomfortable with all that stuff. And then, teachers get involved and it's going to be like a whole mess.
Yeah, it is definitely something that should be taught because there's a lot of aspects about history that are queer that are just not taught. Just devastation that the AIDS crisis caused more deaths than all of the military deaths in the Vietnam War from the US.
Wow.
People don't understand how many queer people were a part of concentration camps and what happened to them after the end of World War II. People don't understand that queerness has been invisible in some of the oldest civilizations, like Mesopotamia. Listen, I can't not advocate for history. That's kind of my thing.
For many, healthcare is the front line of inclusion, and neglect can cost lives. How important is it that gender-affirming care is covered by our health system?
Oh, extremely. I'm a trans man, and growing up, it took me almost a year and a half just to get on puberty blockers.
Yeah.
And then later, I wanted to start testosterone. It took me almost 2 years. I had to wait until I was 16 to start.
Mhm.
I think when it comes to hormones and things like that, it should be the kid's choice about like what they want to do, but I don't feel like they should feel rushed into going into it, which is something that a lot of our society has been like, oh yeah, you're trans, you need to start doing this, this, and this. I think it's great that it's available as soon as you can, but it shouldn't feel rushed by any doctors. It shouldn't be rushed by anyone that isn't ready.
Oh, extremely. Are you kidding me? I understand that a big argument that people use is detransitioners, but again, trans people are already like such a vulnerable community that these like strawman arguments are blown out of proportion to advocate against them, and people don't realize just how important giving people gender-affirming care is, especially during those developing years. Like if someone grows to regret it, okay, well at least they were like finding themselves and finding what they were feeling to like be comfortable in their own skin. And I don't think that just because there's a possibility that someone might regret it, we should prohibit people from having access to that care, which is literally life-saving.
Oh, absolutely. Like anything else, it should be covered by public health. It's just as important as mending a broken bone or, helping someone with cancer or any of those things. It's been proven time and time again that gender-affirming care for trans youth especially is a real life-saving thing. So no, it definitely should be covered by public health. Absolutely.
Oh, it needs to be covered, like 100% covered. And it also needs to be covered in ways that like Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick are falling very short right now. Gender-affirming care should be available for trans kids, from puberty blockers to anything that, parents and doctors deem important to save their life.
Canada positions itself as a safe haven, but are we doing enough? Do you think that there are enough queer-specific services available in terms of like healthcare and like governmental programs, or do you think people are still falling through the cracks?
I definitely think people are still falling through the cracks. I know in Nova Scotia, there's only one person doing top surgery for trans folks, but now I don't even think they're in the province. People have to leave the province for that kind of gender-affirming care.
Right.
So I imagine there's definitely other people falling through the cracks as well. I definitely think it's something that should be looked at more, invested in more, and just seeing what the community needs more for sure.
I think people are still falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
In Vancouver alone, we have about 2 doctors and 2 hospitals that will actually help us with gender-affirming care. We have 2 main places, and even then, with some of the doctors and the nurses that we go to that don't know anything about it. So I feel like in the healthcare system, they need to be a bit more educated about what's going on so that there's more services available.
Advocating abroad can feel like a bold move or an overstep, but silence speaks too. Do you think it's important to prioritize queer refugees from places where they are being oppressed for being queer?
Yeah, actually, my older brother is a queer refugee from Jamaica/Trinidad and Tobago. So that kind of cause is very close to my heart. Not everybody has the privilege of being out in their home country. And so when Canada can step up and do anything possible to make sure that we take in refugees, asylum seekers, or anybody just seeking to immigrate here for a better life, I think it is very important.
Definitely say it's a big, something we should be doing for sure. But I wouldn't say any one group of people takes priority over another.
Yeah.
Everyone's equally important. But I definitely say that would be something to look out for into consideration when taking in refugees. And I realize it's it's kind of hard situation. There's so many people that need somewhere to go. It's hard. Who do you give it to kind of thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that any refugee should be prioritized. I think that if somebody's a refugee here, there's something clearly wrong and that is probably going to affect their life. I think that they shouldn't be invisibilized and they should be recognized that they exist and that it's still an issue going on nowadays. ways.
Do you think it's important for Canada to push back against the homophobia that still exists globally?
Oh, absolutely. It's everyone's responsibility, no matter where you live. And like systemically, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, all the systems of oppression, it's so global in every corner of this universe, mainly due to colonization. I think everybody's responsibility, especially in this political climate where we're seeing attacks on queer people across multiple intersections of identities.
I'd say it's definitely important, especially in the current political climate with all the unrest and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was seeing a recent number that came out that was saying general global trends for like queer acceptance is down, but Canada isn't following those trends as closely. So I think that's a really good sign.
This Pride Month, one flight sparked 1,000 opinions. Some say it was symbolic progress. Others say it was just performative. But here's what we learned. Canadians do want to talk about queer inclusion. They just need space to do it. So let's open that space. Drop a comment. Do public efforts like Air Canada's flight move us forward, or do they distract from real issues? And what does real queer inclusion look like to you?